My father kicked me out to make room for his so-called golden child. Now, they're desperate, begging me to lie and save them from jail after a massive theft scandal. I turned 18 just 4 months ago, but my dad had already kicked me out 6 months prior. The reason? My arrogant half-brother, Derek, 24, entitled and incapable of fending for himself, decided he didn't feel like renting his own place. No, he wanted to come back and live with our father, like a parasite returning to its host. Derek is my father's son from his first relationship. His mother and our dad split shortly after Derek was born, so their bond wasn't exactly forged in those early years. Yet somehow, Derek still managed to secure the title of favorite. Growing up, Derek was always around, more than any custody agreement required. I suppose he was meant to spend half the month with us, but it felt like he was there constantly, looming, suffocating. Maybe that's just my memory, twisted by resentment. Or maybe it's because my father forced us together, trying to craft some artificial brotherhood where none existed. Derek never liked me. I was a threat to his throne. And honestly, I couldn't stand him either. He was a bully, plain and simple. His presence turned our home into a battlefield. He'd shove, taunt, and ridicule me, knowing full well that my father would turn a blind eye. When I complained, my dad dismissed it with a wave, telling me to toughen up. Apparently, enduring Derek's torment was some twisted rite of passage, a lesson in becoming a real man. So, I learned to endure. I let Derek's cruelty wash over me, never fighting back. Because fighting meant facing my father's wrath, and losing that battle was inevitable. It didn't matter who started it, I was always the villain in my father's eyes. His favoritism wasn't subtle. Derek could do no wrong, even when he was clearly the aggressor. And as we grew older, Derek's methods evolved. Physical bullying gave way to psychological warfare. By high school, he had enlisted his friends in his campaign against me. Middle school had been my refuge, but that disappeared once we shared the same building. They mocked me, spread vile rumors, even labeled me as mentally challenged. Imagine that, your own brother orchestrating your social demise. School became a daily gauntlet, and home offered no respite. Friends from elementary school drifted away, afraid of the stigma Derek had crafted around me. I carried that weight until Derek finally graduated. Only then did the halls feel less oppressive. But the damage was done. The exhaustion of constant battle left me numb, too weary to fight the whispers or correct the lies. At home, the pattern persisted. My achievements meant nothing. Good grades? Indifference. A knack for science? Overlooked. Derek, the golden boy, shone with his football trophies and academic accolades, while I remained the shadow he cast. My mother, the only person who ever truly defended me, tried her best to shield me. But even her love couldn't counterbalance my father's influence. He'd charm her, dismissing my complaints as harmless teasing. She wanted to believe him. She loved him. That love blinded her to the reality of who he truly was. I appreciated her efforts, but they were never enough to stem the tide of their cruelty. When Derek left for college, I thought I'd finally breathe freely. But life had other plans. My mother fell ill, lung cancer. Her diagnosis shattered our fragile household. The one common thread between my father and me unraveled. We both loved her deeply, but grief revealed his true colors. Instead of rallying together, he withdrew, retreating into himself and leaving me to navigate the storm alone. His disdain turned to apathy. He didn't even bother to mock me anymore. I ceased to exist in his eyes. I wanted her illness to unite us, to mend the fractures. But hope, as I learned, is often just the prelude to disappointment. It was never meant to be, or maybe it was, but my father would have ensured it never happened. He seemed wired to hate me, incapable of enduring the idea of my happiness. As time dragged on, my mother's health deteriorated, and my father's temper grew more volatile. He oscillated between cold, unbroken silence and venomous hostility. His words, sharp and deliberate, often left me on the brink of tears. I became the silent peacekeeper, swallowing my retorts to avoid giving him more ammunition. My mother's illness cast a long shadow over our home, but whenever Derek returned from college, the tension eased slightly. He wasn't kind, but at least he treated me like I existed. That was more than I could ask for. Things were unbearable when my mother was alive, but after she passed, life turned into an unrelenting nightmare. The house fell into a suffocating quiet, broken only by my footsteps as I managed all the household chores. My father functioned like an automaton: work, home, dinner, repeat, emotionless and distant. I reached out to my grandparents, desperate for help, convinced my father was sinking into depression. They dismissed my concerns, indifferent or perhaps sharing his disdain for me. When he emerged from his stupor, it wasn't as the man I hoped for. He returned to his old self, now fueled by binge drinking and renewed cruelty. His demands were endless, and balancing school with the household responsibilities crushed me. My protests met with cold dismissals. "You don't earn a dime here, this is the least you can do." College became my beacon of hope, the promise of escape from a house that had ceased to be a home the day my mother died. Moving in with my maternal grandparents wasn't feasible. They lived too far, and I had another year of school left. But fate had other plans. A few months ago, my father's smug announcement shattered my fragile stability. Derek was moving back, and I needed to leave. My room was to become a nursery, and the guest room reserved for Derek and his wife. I fought back, but my father had already decided. He gave me 2 weeks to vacate, threatening police intervention if I refused. Panic set in. I knew he meant it. With no other options, I moved in with my grandparents despite the distance and my lingering resentment. 6 months passed. I had no contact with my father and didn't intend to. College was on the horizon, and I was finally free. But life, unpredictable as always, threw a curveball. They showed up at my grandparents' door, desperate and uninvited. Derek had lost his job, prompting their return home. His wife, content being a stay-at-home mom, supported the move. Finding work proved harder than expected. Eventually, my father secured Derek a job at his company, less pay, bruised egos, but it was something. Then Derek's theft surfaced. Caught stealing from the company, both he and my father faced legal trouble, accused of conspiring together. Their visit had a purpose. They needed my help. They came to me with a plan. A plan so outrageous, so drenched in lies, it made my blood run cold. They wanted me to claim that they needed the money for my college fund. That was the excuse they were offering for the theft, not for their own selfish gain, but for me. For my future. My father thought, no, he believed, that if I said this, it would soften the heart of the CEO and buy them some time to return the stolen money. It wouldn't save them from getting fired, but it might keep them out of prison. And they needed me for this. They were counting on me to play the part of the innocent victim, the poor, misunderstood child. I stood frozen in disbelief. How could they even ask me for something like that after all the years of mistreatment? After everything they had done to me, to make me feel small, to break me down at every turn? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. No, I said without hesitation, the word leaving my lips almost instinctively. There was no need to think it over. It was crazy, ridiculous, even. It was a plan so flawed, so desperate, that I couldn't imagine it working. But as soon as I said it, the room shifted. My father's face twisted with frustration, and Derek's eyes flared. They needed me, they insisted. There was no choice. They were facing jail time, a real possibility, and I couldn't let a petty grudge destroy their lives. The audacity! The nerve! I told them, with everything I had, that it wasn't a petty grudge. That it was an ancient history. My father had kicked me out only recently, less than a year ago. That wasn't ancient. That wasn't distant. And that wasn't even the real reason I couldn't help them. No, the real reason was far simpler. It was because their plan was dishonest. It was a lie, and I refused to be part of it. What's more, I knew the man they were trying to deceive. The man who had hired my father when he was struggling, a man who was like family to us. He was my mother's close friend. I had always called him uncle, even before her passing. When she was alive, he was someone who had been there for us, someone who shared a bond that went back decades. I had talked to him at her funeral. He liked me, too. I knew that. He trusted me. But instead of feeling thankful, my father and Derek, both of them, had decided to make a fool of him, to take advantage of that trust. And now, they wanted me to shield them? To lie for them? I couldn't do it. It wasn't just wrong, it was a betrayal of everything my mother had stood for. I told them that they should come clean, repay the stolen money, and face the consequences of their actions. The truth was, they were being given a chance to avoid a lawsuit that would destroy them. A chance to avoid the real prison, their own lies. But my father's anger flared. "I'm not here to listen to your lecture," he shouted. "If you want to help us, then help us. Don't sit here giving us advice that means nothing." I had heard enough. But then, something unexpected happened. My father began to cry. I froze. I had never seen him cry. Not like this. It made me feel uncomfortable, like I was seeing something I wasn't meant to witness. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperation I couldn't ignore. "I'm counting on you," he said, his voice shaking. "You're my son. No matter what's happened, I know I'd help you if you were in trouble. I expected the same from you." Derek echoed the same sentiment. He begged, pleaded with me to help them. He said I was the only one who could, that I was the bridge between them and safety. My mother's absence loomed large in their words. They didn't have her anymore to help them. And so, they turned to me. It was overwhelming. But despite the pressure, despite their pleas, I held my ground. I couldn't be part of their lie. I tried again. I told them that they should just come clean and pay back what they had stolen. It wasn't going to be easy, but they had to face the music. They were angry now. Furious. They said I was just holding on to some childish grudge, that I was being unfair, that I was betraying them in their time of need. The accusation stung, and they left, their parting words hanging in the air. But their guilt? It weighed on me. It gnawed at me. I kept imagining them in jail. I didn't want that for them. But at the same time, I knew that this wasn't my burden to carry. I couldn't be part of something so corrupt. It would be a dishonor to my mother. I would be exploiting her friendship, manipulating a person who had always been kind to me. I couldn't live with that. And yet, the guilt still lingered, gnawing at my insides. I couldn't afford to act on it. This wasn't just about me or my father. This was bigger. I couldn't ignore what they were asking of me. Not without losing myself in the process. So I made my decision. I wasn't going to help them. It wasn't just unethical, it was wrong. It was illegal. And no matter how much they begged, no matter how desperate they became, I wasn't going to risk my integrity. They'd have to sort this out on their own. They had a chance. They had been given a way out. A way to fix this before everything fell apart. The guilt? It was theirs to bear. And I would not be a part of this mess. It was the right thing. The only thing. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I was sure of one thing: I wasn't going to be the one to lie for them.